So where are you currently located right now?
I am in Yulee, Florida, home of Derrick Henry, right outside of a beautiful place called Amelia Island. I live in paradise. I got married about a year and a half ago, and my husband's children are here, and he is a wonderful engaged father, super dad. And so I would never dream of trying to take him anywhere other than by his children, and he wouldn't have it anyway. So I now live in paradise, and so I'm very blessed.
That's better than being in like Sheboygan or somewhere like that. So it's
Yeah. His family's from Minnesota, and his mom and dad laugh. They come down here a lot, but they laugh. They're like, we just, like those Minnesota winters. Like, I'm like, yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, I definitely want to open up here and with some rapid fires and then get into your story. And
Yeah.
I mean, what a great story, motivating story for our listeners out there. First of all, a book recommendation for listeners
Yeah.
outside of yours. We're going to get to yours.
Yes. Anything by Og Mandino. I wrote about him in my book. My mom raised me on Og Mandino. I think he's one of the greatest motivational and sales writers in the world, the greatest salesman, the greatest miracle in the world. If I could travel back in time, he'd be one of the people I would meet. And so anything by Og Mandino. He's a little bit older, so he's passed away. So, the younger generation might not know who Og Mandino is, but I highly recommend that you go check him out.
Okay. That might answer a question coming up in a second. Uh, you're working out. What is
Yes.
one workout song or a song that you're driving down the road that you don't want anybody to know you listen to?
I don't know if it's like one song, but I would say like what song is it that like you get stuck in your stupid head, not stupid
Yeah.
head. It's like stupid song that gets stuck in your head and you're like do, like all day long. And you're like, what do I like that song? Like what is that? And you catch yourself singing it. Yeah, it would probably be one of those. Probably like an NSYNC or something like that. My daughter has turned me into a huge Taylor Swift fan. So
Oh, Swifty.
there's the Swifty, and then she's also turned me into a Morgan Wallen fan as well.
Okay. I
Yeah.
had Groove is in the Heart stuck in my head, and I can't stand that song.
Groove is in the
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
favorite football stadium.
Oh wow. I mean, I obviously love I love my alma mater, Auburn's stadium. It's great. Game day's great. Tell you another one that's just the crowd itself and the surrounding. It's LSU, man. They know how to do parties in football. Yeah, they do.
Like the second you hit the city limits, it's party. What
Oh
is
yeah.
a guilty pleasure of yours?
Oh, guilty pleasure. What's yours? I'm just trying to think about what's yours?
Mine's got to be sweets, some sort of snack that I know I should be
Salt
eating.
is if it's can a guilty pleasure be salt? Ask my daughter. Like anytime we go anywhere or do anything, I'm like, can I have some salt with that? Can I have some salt with that? Like I guess that would be my guilty
Yeah.
pleasure. The body does need salt to survive, so I will say that, but I guess it would be a guilty pleasure too. I guess it used to be also too like some of those like the real estate shows like on Netflix, and
Oh
then
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then I would say too, one of mine used to be like the reality shows, like the Housewives. But I would oftentimes leave watching them. I don't watch them anymore, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like they just pay to go to parties and fight. Like
Yeah.
that's it. Like they go to parties and they fight. And I love you. And I'm like, and then I would ask myself how I felt after I watched those, and I would feel terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why am I even watching this? One that didn't provide any educational value. I feel like crap afterwards. And I'm literally just watching these women get dressed up, drink, and fight. And that's why I'm watching. And so I stopped watching them. I have no desire to. So that was a guilty pleasure that I learned was not a pleasure anymore. Does that
Yeah.
help?
Yeah, you leveled up. You leveled
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Okay. And last one. Dinner for three historical people who are no longer with us.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So Og would be one of them. Jackie Robinson would be
A
another.
good one. No one's
Uh,
called him yet. That's good.
yeah, yeah. Sweetness is another. And then if we were to move Og out, since I've already um used him. It would be a toss up between Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King Jr. If I were going to go back to school, I would study African American studies.
Yeah.
The early days of African American studies. I live on Amelia Island, great little sidebar here. It's not a great sidebar, but a sidebar. I live on Amelia Island, and my husband and I stayed for our anniversary at this bed and breakfast. And one of the reasons why we stayed there was it was reputed to have it was to be a stop on the Underground Railroad.
Mm.
And we got there, and the lady was really nice. She was like, "Hey, we just bought it. We could not find, any blah, blah, blah." Well, across the street from this house, my husband, when he was married before and had his kids, lived in an old house there that actually had a secret room underneath the stairs in the
Wow.
basement, and you could pull back like a little false floor and get
Yeah.
to it. And I said to my bonus daughter yesterday, I said, what if like they just had the house off? Like, what if they were just wrong with it? It really was a stop. It just wasn't that house. It was the one across the street. So very interested in that. But the other day, I knew that Amelia Island, being one of these barrier islands, I knew that it was a UNESCO World Heritage Site because it was where like the Middle Passage happened, where thousands and thousands and thousands of Africans were stolen from Africa to be put into slavery here. And so it's hidden, like it's not on the tourist sheets, it's not any of those
Yeah.
things, because it's not the pretty fun and sun glitzy part of this island. But I went and found it, and I sat there. I took my dog and I sat there, and there's a bench and there is a sign there. And I just sat there, and I told my daughter, we were having a conversation, we have great conversations about it. I said, it's a place where you just go and pay homage and honor, and you just shut up and sit and recognize that so many people stepped right here on these shores, right in front of this bench, terrified, and and all the horrificness that went on with the slave trade, and just and so I say all that to say is I'm hugely into history and that part of our history, and it's fascinating and it's sad, and I think if you don't recognize those things, we're bound to repeat them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's crazy. You got that location there. It's like here,
It's
Montgomery, with Martin Luther King and the Legacy
yes,
Museum and everything. I mean, just so
yeah.
much history. But
It's fascinating, and
very
and
absolutely.
you just have to dig into it. And I think with the reckoning of our country and all of different monuments and things being torn down, it's not that I'm against that, but I definitely think that one of the greatest places you can take your kid is to a museum,
Hmm.
and or to some sort of history, and say this is what happened, and this wasn't even that long ago, and I just think it's so important to do that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to get into your journey here. So tell our
Yeah.
listeners out there, where did you grow up and what did your parents do?
I love this podcast because this is such different questions than I get, by the way. So that's kudos to you. I was a military brat. I am a military brat.
Oh,
Dad,
wow.
grandfather, brother, all Army men. My grandfather's brother never came back from Korea. And then I married an Air Force man, 25 years in the reserves. He helped build and worked on Skunk Works
Hmm.
um,
Oh, the
and
U2s.
yeah. And so, and then now he has a company that he works and does new novel and transformative for the warfighter.
Hmm.
And so it's military is hugely runs through my veins. And so we moved every couple of years.
Yeah.
My dad was in the military. My mom did a little bit of everything back when pagers were like the thing. My mom was number
Yeah.
one in sales and pagers in the country. And then she went on to build log homes. She and my dad built log homes for 25 years and were very, very good at that. So because of that, we moved my stepdad, I should say, but we moved every 2 to 3 years. And then I would go on to be a sportscaster and move every 2 to 3 years. And so I have joked once I got married, moved to Florida. I joked, I said, I'm not moving. Like, I don't want to move again. Like, I want to
Your
stay
military retired at that point.
here. Yeah. I don't want to see the inside of a moving box or really ever again.
With all that moving, like what were some of your aspirations? Did you know that sports was something you wanted to go into?
No, I only knew that I had two brothers that played baseball, basketball, archery, tennis, BMX, bike racing. Literally, it was a field, a match, or whatever. I was there,
Yeah.
and my mom put me in soccer. I wasn't great at soccer, and then we went straight from that to dance. And I've been a dancer my whole life, so that was great. I did not know. All I knew was I was really good with people. I came on in front of a crowd, that I was a great communicator. And so, because of that, I couldn't figure it out. I went to school for general assignment reporting to be a broadcaster, but then quickly realized that house fires and car wrecks were just not my thing. I'm way too much of an empath. I'm way too sensitive, which there's nothing wrong with being too sensitive. It's a superpower, but it was meaning I just couldn't. I would take it home every single night.
Hmm.
And I was working with the campus TV station, and I'd say coincidentally, but I don't believe in coincidences, got sent out to cover a Auburn football game, and it was Auburn Syracuse. I think it went into like 3 overtimes, and I just remember the speed of the game, the crunch of the helmets, the everything. And it's intoxicating. I was hooked, and I never looked back. I started doing sportscasting and was a sportscaster for 17 years before retiring in 2019.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about your sportscaster career. What was it that made you go to Auburn?
I loved Auburn. I was an Auburn fan growing up. I thought about going to Alabama for broadcasting, because I had a really good broadcasting school. And then but I was an Auburn fan. It was also close to my grandmother's house, but I was an Auburn fan, and I wanted to go there. I loved it. And I also learned that even if some other place might have a better school for something, but at that point in time, and I think it is true in certain studies that you go into, it is what you make of it. If you work, if you get the internship, if you do the thing. So that's why I went to Auburn. Grew up an Auburn fan. And in Alabama, you're either Auburn or Alabama. That's it.
Hmm.
And me and just a couple of friends were like the lone Auburn fans, growing up and watching football in big settings as well.
Yeah, if you're not serious about sports at all, you pull for Troy or
Yeah.
something like that. But yeah. What about the irony of you going to an Auburn Syracuse game and broadcasting is what you wanted to go into? Syracuse, well known for that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and from there, you mentioned you get into sports and you were a field reporter with Fox Sports. How did you end up landing that gig?
They found me. That's the thing in life, particularly with broadcasting, is you worry about being good, and they'll find you. In football, you doesn't matter where you go to school, they'll find you. Sweetness was a perfect example of that. They found him. They'll
Go to
find
a
you.
small college.
Yeah, yeah, they'll find you wherever you are. And yeah, I mean it. That's yeah, that's pretty much it.
And that's most kids, dream come true. I remember at my fifth grade year, we were doing like career day, and I went in with like a toilet paper roll with some paper tinfoil stuffed on top, and I was an ESPN reporter. Like kids dream about that kind of stuff. And how was it for you when that became a reality and you have Fox Sports? You're signing a contract with them. How cool was that?
Yeah, it was Fox Sports, and then like right after that, it was a Fox Sports, and then I got tapped to be like the first one, of the only females in a top 5 market doing radio with Cordell Stewart in Atlanta, and then I went from there and became the first female host on Sirius XM collegiate channels, and then I got asked to vote for the Heisman, and then I got asked for the first 5 years to host the college football playoffs. So it was just like there was never a time in my career where I was not in complete awe. Like, holy crap, looking at the sky going, I know that was you, God. Thank you. Oh my gosh. But that was the thing that if you asked any of my people that I worked with, like I put relationships first. I never did a story, I was never a gotcha reporter, but I never did these gotcha stories or anything like that over my relationships. I was people first. And people knew too that I played well with others in the sandbox, meaning I wasn't difficult to work with. Yeah, I worked hard. Definitely being a woman in the industry, you have to work twice as hard to be respected half as much. But there wasn't a time where it was like, oh, that Rachel, she's big headed, she's, full of herself. And no, I knew I was working when others were partying. I worked nights. I worked weekends. I worked, I look back at like my Facebook memories will pop up and it's like, hey, I'm working 3 shows today, or hey, I'm doing this, or hey, I'm working while. And, I hustled. I hustled my rear end off, but there was never a time where it was lost on me how absolutely fortunate and blessed I was and am.
And I'm curious about what you said about relationships because I teach emotional intelligence, and one of the things we talk about is, you know, intellectual capacity and technical skills kind of get you in the door, but then emotional intelligence and relationships is what keeps you there. For a lot of what you were explaining there about being a reporter, just being good and standing out, mirrors a lot with the military, where you're told like you're on a team, but at the same time you got to perform well individually. What do you say to someone that's like, I don't have time for relationships. I just got to get the job done. That's what it takes to succeed.
Mm, that it's lonely, that it must be lonely for you if that's the way you think.
Yeah.
That connection I wrote about in the book, connection is the balm of joy. That if you think like that, you will most likely have the feeling that you step on whoever you need to step on to get to wherever you get, and it's just part of it. And the hustle, well, let me tell you something, baby, those people will come back up. They will present themselves again in your life, and you will feel terrible, and you'll probably have to reckon, with the fact that you stepped on them. You will never lose when you put people first. You will never lose when you help somebody at work. You will never lose. And it somebody may get promoted in front of you. Somebody may get, something may happen for somebody better than you, but I'm telling you, you're not going to lose when you invest in people, because people are the true, I say this all the time, is that I am a millionaire, a zillionaire, billionaire, whatever you want to call it, because of people. People are my currency. And because of that, I'm so rich and so blessed, man. I'm so blessed. I do not judge my life by the bank account. Of course, money makes things easier. We all want to make money. I have a friend named Brittany Turner who went from being homeless to now owns an island next to Richard Branson. And she
Oh,
has,
wow.
I know, right? And she has this saying, she says, I'm not ashamed to want to make more money because I am a river, not a reservoir, and anything that I make will pass through me to bless other people. And so I think there's, disassociating yourself from having shame around wanting to make money, but also at the same time having that same, because you will help people, but at the same time saying, I put people first. I've always put people first. I am a people person. I am a connector. And that is, yeah, that's everything to me. People are.
I'm a connector too. I'm glad you said that about currency because I always say that people are investing in people gives you the best dividends possible. I mean, the connections in general. And I get it, not everybody's a people person, but oh my
But
God.
you can change too. That's the other
Yeah.
thing is people say to me a lot. They said, "Well, I'm just not really. I'm a natural pessimist." I had an Uber driver that told me that. She said, "I'm a natural pessimist," but then she said, "I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. I got sick and tired of
Yes.
myself." And she
Yeah.
said, "So I changed and I started reading books, and I started reading books on positivity and all of those things." I have to make your listeners laugh. If you heard me clapping a couple of times, there's like a little fungus fly that, like, I have a couple plants. I'm a plant person. I have
I
a
just
couple
thought you were
plants.
really stressing a point.
I have a couple of plants that have gotten infested with these really pesky fungus flies. And so I'm like
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to hit them with like 2 or 3 different modalities, or like, things to fix it, to kill them, but they kind of just fly around. They're tiny
Well,
and
when
they're
I see you do this, I know you got it.
yeah. So anyway, so if your people hear me clapping in the podcast, that's what I'm trying to do. There's one that's just like, right here in my face. But yes, how about that aside?
Yeah. Well, I do want to ask you because relationships are big.
Yeah.
And for you, the part of the story that really stood out to me, you're a female in what, especially at the time, was a male dominant industry.
Yeah.
What are some hurdles you had to overcome? I mean, because you were the first female to host Sirius XM College, you hosted the inaugural college football
Yeah.
playoff game, which I know there were men that would cut off their right and left legs for that position. So being such a trailblazer, I'm sure at some point there was some sexism along the way and some people trying to hold you down. So if you don't mind sharing with our listeners some of the things you had to encounter and overcome.
Yeah, all of it. I even went through sexual harassment, and it was before Me Too. And I went to a couple of mentors of mine in the business, and they all cried and said, literally teared up and said, "We wish it weren't the case, but we're at a place in time." This again was before Me Too. That if you blow the whistle, and we'll absolutely support you, but if you blow the whistle, we feel like the industry, you'll never work again. You may be have a lot of money, but you'll never work again. And I didn't talk about it for a really long time, and then a couple of years ago I began talking about it. And I wish now I would have spoken out then, because come to find out there were other females that this person had done the same thing to. And so I went through that. I went through, there were men on Sirius XM. I'd be hosting with a host, and we'd be on the radio, and this guest would refuse to answer my questions. Like, it was so blatant. Like, um, I have been through situations where, on the air, this guy calls in to this radio show that was on my station and said that this Rachel Baribeau, now he was kind of being a jerk. But he was like, she's better than everybody on there, and she's so good, she's so good. She's just that, whatever. And the other host said, well, she sure is pretty. And that was his response. And it was just, yeah. So, I mean, I dealt with all of it. I dealt with, comments like, wow, you really do know your stuff. Like they didn't think I knew. I had to.
Yeah.
So it was, I dealt with all of that. And it was a reason why for 7 years, I coached over 40 women, young women that wanted to be broadcasters.
Wow.
And, I did it for 7 years, and people said, why did you do that? And I said, because I had nobody to coach me. I wore the wrong clothes. I cried in front of the boss. I went to the dinners with the smarmy guy, because he said he could get me a job, and he was, trying to hit on me. And I did all those things. And I wanted to be able to tell the young women, you don't have to go to the dinners, and please cover yourself up. I'm sorry. You can express yourself wherever else you want. But if you go into a locker room with your boobs and your butt hanging out, that's what you're going to get. If that's what you're putting on sale, that's what you're going to get. I would, encourage them to be tough and negotiate, on their own behalf, and know that they're worth it. I would, so all the things that I went through, I wanted to pass on the knowledge to other young women, that they did not have to go through the things I went through.
Yeah, and I hear that, and that's encouraging to hear on your end of advice, because my daughter's 15,
Yeah.
loves college basketball, and is always texting me stuff and sending it to me. And I worry about her when she gets older, but definitely we're moving in the right direction. I'm not going to
Yeah.
say we're there, but we're at least moving in the right direction. Out of those 40 or so people that you coached, what do you think was the one story that you heard that really stood out to you, where it's like, all right, this is paying off. This is filling my cup a little bit.
Yeah, all of them did, honestly. I mean, some of them are still in the business. Some are very successful. Some decided to, go a different route. But I think it was really just that you gave me the courage. There was one particular story where I was feeling particularly defeated. I had an agent that told me, he said, there, hit kind of the, one of the pinnacles of my career. And he said, you're never going to get this because you're a female. And I was like, what? And I remember sitting on my stairs, and it was like, they're just never going to give it to you. Like, they're just, and I was like, what? Like, to be so mad about something I couldn't change.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like quitting. And I was saying that to somebody that I coached, and she said, but if you quit, what will I do? And that, like,
Mhm.
whoo, that hit me right between the eyeballs. So I was like, okay. Okay. And I remember back in 20, when was this? I don't know, but it was probably 2016, 15, somewhere around in there. And the Birmingham newspaper, there was a magazine had asked me, could they follow me around SEC Media Days and write a story about me. And it was still one of my favorite stories to this day. And it was like, Rachel Baribeau is the hardest working woman in the industry. Well, what happened was, I got a call from Sirius XM that day that their normal host had an accident, and could I fill in? for the next 3 days, and like have the marquee show, where like Nick Saban came through and Steve
Yep.
Spurrier and like, you know, and so I did. And, I've been doing this, but that was like being thrust on one of the bigger stages, there. And I remember having people come in, like the SIDs and the people that were with the players and the teams. They said, we've been doing this for 5 years and we've been all over the place. This SEC Media Days, we've listened to every question by different people. They said, you literally ask the most amazing questions and the most different questions. And I'm like, oh,
Feels
and
so good.
I've never forgotten that. And it was like, when a coach will sit across from me and say, that's a really good question, or nobody's asked me that before. One time I asked Nick Saban, I said, you're really cerebral. And he said, what's that mean? I said, it means you're smart, coach.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he would tell me when I left Tuscaloosa, he would, end up telling me, hey, you asked me some really neat, interesting, challenging questions. And if you could survive his bite, his bark at the beginning, because he'd bark a lot of times. He'd always give you a really thoughtful answer, but he made me a better reporter. So yeah, I think those are the stories that, hey, that was such an amazing interview, or nobody's ever asked him that before,
Yeah.
or no, nobody's asking that way. Those are the things that kept me going as well.
And Sabin will let you know if he does not like
Oh,
the question.
yeah,
Yeah.
he will absolutely. But people would tell me with Sabin, they said you would get like the most thoughtful answers out of him,
Yeah.
because you would ask, you would ask about, I remember I saw it not long ago. It was after a game. I asked about, one of the seniors or something, and because it was senior night, and he launched into this story about one of the seniors and the impact that he made on the program. And they were like, he never would have even gone there had you not asked him that, And I remember one year I asked him about a friend of his that was dying from, I asked him what he was thankful for, because it was Thanksgiving.
Mm.
And he said that he had a friend that was dying of brain cancer, and that he was grateful that he had got to spend time with them. And one of my questions, I asked him something, I can't remember what it was. And it launched into a story about his wife, Miss Terry, and how she's the boss, and how she picks out his clothes, and he may be the boss at work, but she's the boss at home. And I remember this story came out of it, and it was that at Christmas, they were opening gifts and whatnot, and she basically said, I know what you really want. And he was like, what is that? And she was like, my blessing to go watch film on Christmas. And she gave him her blessing to go upstairs and watch film on Christmas. And so just little stories like that. Like, she allowed him to do that. This is the craziest story. You're like making me go way back. I had a boss when I was writing for Gridiron Now, and he said, why don't you write about Nick and Terry? And I said, yeah. He said, I think their anniversary was coming up. And I said, that's going to be not going to happen, but I'll try.
Yeah.
And I remember reaching out to Miss Terry because I knew her. And I said, Miss Terry, I'd love to write about, your love story. And to my absolute surprise, she said, our anniversary is in 10 days. You better write fast. And then began to tell me the story of these two, and how she liked him first, and she like did a cartwheel in front of him, and he just like walked right by her. And once they finally started talking on the bus on the way to a science fair, and then he would go outside his dad's gas station to the payphone and call. But the payphone also served as like, I think like the office phone or something.
Yeah.
So like they would have to hang up, and then like they would call again, hang up and call again. And how they were so poor when they got married that he could not afford to take her on a honeymoon. So she goes with him, which makes me tear up. She goes with him to every game, because it's like they're doing a honeymoon for the very first one that they didn't
Oh,
get to do. And when he
yeah.
made his first bonus check, when he was a coach, he paid off her parents' house. And just little things like that. And I remember that story went completely viral, and she wrote most of it. I just wrote, I just filled in pieces,
Yeah.
whatever. But Miss Terry Sabin trusted me with her story, and it just blows my mind to this day.
That's so cool to hear like a different side versus,
Oh yeah.
like you said, those questions can spark versus just y'all look lackadaisical on defense today,
Yeah.
and the same song, different verse every Saturday.
And he gets tired of those.
Oh
Honestly,
yeah,
you can see him light up when he actually gets a different kind of question.
yeah. No, that's awesome to hear. And so, what made you decide to? I mean, all the success that you've got, like we mentioned, the inaugural college football national title game, which is crazy. What made you decide to unplug the mic and found change the narrative?
Yeah.
Hashtag change the narrative.
Yeah, yeah. Hashtag. Well, we added an I'm to make it even better, like make it more declarative. I'm changing the narrative a couple of years in, but for 17 years, my identity was as a sportscaster. That's what I was. I was a sportscaster. And here I am telling players, you're more than a football player. Who are you away from the field? Yada, yada, yada. And I didn't really know how intertwined my own identity was with being a sportscaster. And so in 2016, I started this movement. I went to speak at FSU football and I said, at that time it was purpose, passion, platform, my own experience of domestic violence and finding what sets your soul on fire. And you were born for more and you could change the narrative. I never thought it would be anything. I thought I was just kind of giving these talks on the side. That was August of 2016. In December of 2016, I was with Clemson 27 days before they dismantled Ohio State en route to a national championship.
Yep.
And then the next year it blew up. Alabama and Baylor called and everybody started calling. And and it got bigger than anything I could ever fathom. And the reason why I hung it up was because as much as I loved broadcasting, and I did, I there's there's nothing that can match what the feeling when somebody says to me, your talk changed my life, or I've forgiven my mother because of you, or I'm in therapy because of you, or when
Wow,
a player's mom now serves in the movement. We have my former players' moms who serve in the movement.
that's super
One
cool.
one that plays now with the Steelers and the former quarterback at Minnesota, both serving in the movement. And so, yeah, and it also too became a conflict of interest, to be honest with you. I remember the Alabama LSU game. I was there and I stuck a mic for Sirius in one of the LSU players' face, and I could see the confusion go across his face because he was like, wait a minute, she was just at LSU 3 months ago or a month ago talking to us, and I spilled my guts to her about my trauma, my life, my whatever. Is she gonna? And I could tell, like I would never, but I could tell the inference was, or the question was, is she going to use that against me? Is she going to go on the radio and talk about what I've told her? So I was doing these two different roles.
Yeah,
And then they became a little bit of a conflict of interest, conflict in my soul, a moral question. And for a year, 2019, I had been fighting God and I had been trying to get different jobs. And I was still employed at Sirius, but I was trying to climb the ladder and do other things. And there were some opportunities that it seemed like I was a shoe in for that didn't work out. And finally, God, I hosted the first ever mental health game between Minnesota and Maryland, the first national mental health game between two Big Ten teams.
yep,
And I left there and I was going to Mexico on a solo healing trip, where the last place my mom and I had gone before she passed away. And I was 33,000 feet in the air and I wrote my retirement letter. And I actually had already had it written, but I had been fighting it. I've been fighting it for months and months, and I was just bawling. I mean, the poor person that was sitting next to me
yeah.
was like,
He's
what is
playing
going
Candy
on?
Crush, and
What's happening with this? And I was ugly crying. And I wrote the letter and I sent it. And people are still to this day blown away by the fact that I was employed and I quit, that I emailed Sirius and I quit. And yeah, I did it and I've never looked back. And it's been an amazing journey.
wow, yeah, that's like super. And I'm glad to see this mental health game. I think Duke basketball did one uh,
Yep.
a couple years ago as well. And then let our listeners know about your book, Relentless
Yes.
Joy: Finding Freedom, Passion, and Happiness.
Yes. Yes. So it's coming out June 20th. I will say that pre-orders matter. I didn't recognize how much pre-orders matter in the book world until I became an author. Like, you are judged based on the amount of books that you pre-sale, and pre-sales mean anything before June 20th and that first week. So please, please go buy it. It's available wherever books are sold. It is for the person that feels blasted, barren, like they're grieving life, they're grieving an opportunity. Life just is hard. It's hard to put groceries on the table. It's hard to survive. You're in a hard marriage, any of those things. Or it's consequently for the person who feels like they kind of have it all. They have a good life, good kids, but something's missing. Like
Mhm.
something, I'm just can't put my finger on it, but there's something else here. So it's for both those people. There's some sports stories in it. There's non-sports stories. Bill Snyder, legendary Bill Snyder, he's my mentor and one of my best friends.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, he lent his name to the book, and I've already got
He's
another
been
book.
doing it for quite some time.
Yeah, yeah, Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Uh, and I actually am going to write about him in my next book, about how I met him and our relationship, and
Oh
I'm going
wow.
to write about Bobby Bowden. He was also a friend of mine, and I'm also going to write about the Sabin. So the next book is going to have some heavy sports stories
Oh
in
yeah.
it, for sure. So obviously, I'm insane. I have not launched my first book, and I'm already thinking about my
That's
second.
good though. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, so it's I'm very excited about it. But yes, please go order it. Some churches are using it for small groups. You can use it for book clubs. It's for men, it's for women, it's for teenagers, 6 to 96, six maybe a little young, but it's a great book, and I think people are going to love it. And now the coolest part of what's happening now is a few people have the book, and are giving me feedback and telling me what they love
Mm.
and what meant something to them and this and that. And that's the thing that's really getting me, is seeing and hearing it through other people's eyes.
I saw something, and we're gonna have the links for that
Yeah.
too. I saw something where someone did something similar. They had a little bit of like a pre-release,
Yeah.
and then they were getting those testimonials, and then they had a QR code where you could go and you could read for each chapter, like what that meant to each person.
That's
Which
so good.
Yeah, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, we will have the link, and you can also order them in bulk. I saw you
Yes.
have like bulk orders, and it is like, trust me, if you're looking for a number, she's got it on there. So go on there. There's some incentives for each one as well.
Yes.
So definitely go check out. Like I said, we'll have the links in the episode description. And last question for you, and this has been an incredible interview. When someone, I mean, your book's going to be hanging around forever. There's audio clips of you, articles, all this stuff. So your legacy's out there. But when people mention your name 50 years from now, what do you want them to say about you?
That's a good question. When I lost my mom in 2019, I began to think about my own mortality. And I began to think about, it's not a question of if, it's just when. And I say it in the book, we're all walking each other home. We don't know how long we have on this planet. So I want people to say she loved passionately and relentlessly. She cared about people. She gave, she was a giver. That's what I want people to say, because we have this opportunity to be a ripple on a pond. And the famous Cecil Hurt was a friend of mine, and I hosted his show in Alabama, and I wrote about this in the book. And he said, he was supposed to come hear my talk at Alabama in 2017, but he couldn't be there. And he called me afterwards, and he said, "I'm so sorry I couldn't be there." He said, "But I heard about it." And I said, "Oh, okay, thank you so much." He said, "No, no, no, Rachel, you don't get it." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You think you just affected one player in that room today." He said, "If one player goes back and breaks a generational cycle of abuse or abandonment or drug addiction or alcohol addiction or whatever it is, porn or anything, one person breaks that cycle, then it's his kids and his grandkids and their grandkids and their grandkids. So you think, Rachel, you just affected one player in that room today. You have no idea the future generations of people that'll be affected by your message." And speaking of those bonus, I have to tell, I haven't told the story publicly yet. In 2017, I went to Baylor. Baylor was in the thick of, had just fired every administrator, and there was not a player, a coach, or administrator that was there that had anything to do with the scandal, the sexual scandal. Yet there were players being called rapist, and no means
It's a
no.
basketball team, right?
It was their football team.
Football team.
And so there were players there that were still being denigrated, and their fans were being called horrible names at airports and at games. It was just really bad. And so I went there to speak, and the players had their heads down. They didn't want to hear me. They were tired of being lumped in with these accusations they had nothing to do with just because they played at Baylor. And I went in there that day and I told them, you're a king, and I believe in you, and amazing things are going to happen. And like something miraculous in that room happened. Like scales fell away. They understood that I was for them and that I believed in them. And so that was 2017. Well, the Baylor fans, this is so cool. The Baylor fans jumped on it and loved me. I went back many times. They supported me. They kind of made me a de facto Baylor fan. Fast forward 6 years, Baylor fans found out that I was asking people to donate books, which that's the bonus page you talked about. I was asking people to donate books to a Christian halfway house for women that are coming out of drugs, jail, abandonment, abuse, prostitution. And then when we hit that goal, we're going to raise books for kids in school that want a copy to be able to read this. So they found out I was trying to raise money to donate these books. Over the weekend, these Baylor fans raised over $2,000 to donate books to me.
Oh, wow.
And the message board said she was there for us in 2017. Let's be there for her in 2023.
How cool
And
is that?
it's just amazing. Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. Full circle.
Yeah, you
Full
never
circle.
really know your impact until you see
You
things
don't.
like that.
You don't. And I had no clue that in 2017, my actions in 2017 would encourage and influence Baylor fans in 2023 to buy books for women they'll never meet
Yeah.
that are coming out of the most horrific circumstances. And because of these fans in Texas and all over the world, these Baylor fans, these women will get a free book put in their hands because of what I did back in 2017. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing.
Super cool. What an impact. What final comments do you have for our listeners?
Oh man, it goes along with the book. But I would say the name of the book is Relentless Joy. My middle name is Joy. I have been through enough in my life if I went and lived, I say this jokingly, if I went and lived in a mountain in a cave and had a pet goat, nobody would blame me. I've been through, abuse, addiction, lost everything and built back, lost both my parents, been through suicidal ideation. I've been through everything, and yet still there is joy. And I just want to encourage your listeners that there is a choice in everything we do, and that's bitter or better. We get that choice every single day. It can break you. It can stomp you out, or you can say, you know what? I'm going to be better for this. I'm going to learn from it. Yes, I may have fallen down. Yes, I may have screwed up. And yes, I may have failed, but it's only a failure if you don't learn the lesson, right? So I would just encourage your listeners to open your eyes and notice the joy that's all around you. Notice the joy that is begging to be noticed, right? And we call it a joy starter in the book, and that's somebody who notices joy, spreads joy, and is joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care what you've been through. I've probably been there, there's not a reason to live this one precious life blasted and barren. There is a path forward, and I talk about it in the book.
Well, what an incredible episode, folks. Like I said, we're going to have all the links in the episode description for this. So definitely make sure you check it out. Go support her. If you like what we're doing here, head over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or theshadowspodcast.com. Leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the show. And until next week, we'll continue to bring light into these stories out of the shadows here on the Shadows Podcast.